morning, everyone, and welcome to a new episode of the Good Old Podcast. I'm Jacquie Franciulli from Wahoo's 24/7, and we're starting off the Tony Elliott era with a win. The Cavaliers beat Richmond 34-17, and I know some of you aren't quite happy with the win. Well, you're happy with the win, but you're not happy with a few things that you saw. First game is really easy to overreact. You either think your team is a championship contender, a world beater, or you think it's the worst team ever and you're not going to win a single game for the rest of the season. So we're going to avoid these two. We're going to avoid world beaters, and we're going to avoid that this team is not going to amount to anything. The first game is a good chance to evaluate, especially for the coaches who are trying to adapt to new schemes. So we're not going to overreact of what we saw. We're not going to name Heisman contenders, and we're not going to name that this team has no Power 5 talent. We're not going to do that. So when we look at this win, we're going to say Tony Elliott kicked off his era with a win, point one, which we have seen is not easy to do. We have seen other teams struggle on the opening game of the season to lesser opponents technically. So, point one, good thing to start with a win. Point two, a lot of good talent on this team that can improve as the season goes on, as they adapt and learn in their two new schemes for offense and defense. So, point two. Now, the next thing is we're going to dive in the other key things that we saw. And one of the things that I think everyone should be really happy about is that you have a guy under center called Brennan Armstrong. I know it wasn't as flashy of a game as some might expect, but I didn't expect what we talked about with Preston Willet and Greg Mendia when we were breaking down the offense after the fall camp. We all said the same thing. We all thought that this wasn't going to be an offense where you're going to blow away with high numbers at occasions. But honestly, he still had a really good day, and really, he had 246 passing yards. He had 105 yards rushing. That's a great day. He's also broken the record for the all-time total offensive numbers for Virginia football program. So he had a good day. Yes, he would like to take that interception back, but Brennan Armstrong in his first live game in this new offense did a good job controlling the tempo and did a good job of getting the ball out. So he finished 21 for 33, 1 interception and 2 touchdowns. And then he, like I said, he also had that 105 yards rushing, 64 of those coming from that first touchdown, that touchdown run that he had. And when you look at that touchdown play, all the coaches said the same thing. That was not a scripted play to Brennan. That's what Brennan will give you. Brennan will give you the ability to call an audible on the field. He will get through his progressions really quickly. That's what I really like about him. He will read the defenses and he will pick his progressions, go through his reads and say, that's not there, that's not there. And then he saw his opportunity and he ran for it. That's the type of quarterback that Brennan is. And that's the positive that we saw. He still has that ability on this offense. So they're not, holding him back in that regard. The other thing that stood out to me is our biggest off-season question. What was the biggest off-season question? The offensive line. And I know a lot of you are going to say, well, it was against Richmond and they were having new talent on that D-line. They were trying to, it's like, yes, but again, UVA was had to transition a new O-line. And what we saw was they didn't have many big breakdowns. That one sack that we saw Brennan Armstrong go down in the second half, where he came up kind of gingerly and he was kind of holding his shoulder. He said he's fine. Don't worry about it. But he was holding his arm or shoulder. And when you look at it, it didn't seem like it was a breakdown in the O-line. It seemed like Mike Hollins was, I think, a little bit too quick. But it was definitely seemed like a miscommunication issue there. I think there was a breakdown where Hollins needed to go. So I think in that respect, I don't blame the O-line. And I think they did a decent job. I think Mikhail Boley in his first start did pretty well. I think there were times where you saw that he was a first year, which is expected, because not only was he a first year, but he got onto grounds in the summer, and he also missed a portion of the fall camp with an injury. Remember, he had a boot on his leg, and then he had a tape around his foot. So he progressed, and he earned his starting position because of his hard work and motivated personality. But he still needed some game reps, and he did get those reps, and he didn't do anything overtly wrong. He didn't do anything that cost you a game. So that's a good thing for a first year offensive lineman. There, he's gonna have to improve on a few things, but again, that was a good first start for Mikhail Boley. Now, what you did notice is that Virginia didn't try to do too much on that side of the ball. If you notice how they rushed the ball, they tended to go to the other side, tend to go to the right, which, with Derek Devine and Logan Taylor, that's what you would expect with two veterans on that side. Happens on the other side. You had John Paul Flores and Mikhail Boley. John Paul Flores is a veteran, but again, it's a new guy coming to Virginia, coming into the summer as well. So you had two of the newer offensive linemen on that side compared to two veterans on the other side that had worked together and they've been together for a while. So I understand that decision. So that was a really smart, and that's something that goes back to what I said earlier, is that you can scheme around a weak O-line in the beginning of the season, especially because you have those options. Logan Taylor, Derek Devine a little bit more. You also see, like, hey, we have a freshman first year and left tackle. Let's not try to script our plays by running on that side of the ball. Let's try on the other side of the ball. Again, it's all about scheming and play calling to your strengths rather than highlighting your weaknesses. So again, that's what you saw in that game. So I gave the O line a solid B. I didn't see anything. There's John Paul Flores had a penalty. I think it was two penalties on him that you go, okay, this is just the first game jitters. We'll get better. I think he had one of the false starts. That you'll get better as the season goes on. You get your timing correct, and that's something the offense needs to work better on, is that timing. You saw that with some of the wide receiver route running. You saw that with, the drops. There are a couple of things on that offense that just needs to get cleaned up, and that's what we saw in that first game. That's why we didn't see those big numbers on that first game. But we also saw that, Lavelle Davis is back. Lavelle Davis is going to be a big playmaker. And if you're on YouTube, I'm about to add the stats onto her screen. Lavelle Davis obviously had that big touchdown. He said it just felt great to get out there and be healthy again. And he just felt like he waited for this moment. He said it was a long time coming, and he actually wanted to call the strength staff from the former staff to say thank you, because although Tony Elliott and his staff has helped him in the recuperation from the spring onwards, a lot of his recuperation was under the former staff. So he was very grateful to them, and he wanted to call them to thank them, to help them get back into game fitness. So having Lavelle Davis back is certainly a big plus for them. But I think anyone who's watched the game, anyone who's come out of that game, the first thing you should notice about the offense, although we talked about Brennan Armstrong, we talked about the O-line, it's about the run game. Let me move this up here so we can see just the overall stats here. So when you look at this, you see 246 net passing yards, but you also see 259 rushing yards. We heard about this balanced offense, and folks, we got it. And I think what I really appreciated was not so much that you have that balanced offense that numbers wise, because that's what you want. You want that too. But what I liked was that sometimes they extended those drives and stayed on the field a little bit, especially in that first half, not quite in the second half, but in the first half. You saw them stay on the field longer, which will help the defense regroup and not get so tired, especially in the heat, and especially when they face some tougher offenses down the line. So that was really good for this offense to show their ability to stay on the field and then also produce a run game. 259 yards rushing. I think when you look at what UVA did, I think in the first quarter, I think they amassed more rushing yards in the first quarter against Richmond than they did the entire game against Virginia Tech. So that is a good positive. Another good positive is this young man named Paris Jones. I'm going to move back over here. So Paris Jones, that we heard so much about Paris during spring and also during fall. He was hurt halfway through. He was hurt for the first half of spring, so he only came toward the end, but he quickly made his way into the rotation. And then the fall camp, once Ronnie Walker went down, we only heard about Paris Jones, how he would be the number one back. He would be number one back over Mike Collins, over Cody Brown, over Xavier Brown. And he showed why on Saturday. Not only was he a very good rusher, but he also had no problems going after the blitz. But what I really liked about him on the running side was that sometimes a running back can get too eager and go a little bit go ahead of their blockers, and Paris would hold himself behind the line and wait for his blockers, which allowed him to get more yardage, and he was over 100 yards rushing. He had 104 net yards. He had that touchdown. He also had a receiving touchdown. Tony Elliott said he actually ran the wrong route on that one. But at the end, he scored a touchdown. But they said it would work on him a little bit. He said that when you have your day, you have your day. So I do like Paris Jones at RB1. I think he deserved that honor of being the number one running back, and he showed why. It wasn't a fluke or anything like that. Hollins had a pretty rough day, inconsistent. He did have a touchdown, but he did fumble the ball and he landed on top of it. So he did have good instincts to land on top of recover his fumble, but he did have an inconsistent day. I really like some flashes that we saw from Xavier Brown towards the end of the game. I know it's kind of hard to judge in those types of game. He was kind of garbage time and didn't have a lot of the starters, but I'm really excited to see what Xavier Brown can do in the future for Virginia. I think you're gonna see him contribute a little bit more. And then you also have to consider that Ronnie Walker and Cody Brown are also featuring in this running game a little moving forward. Ronnie Walker has been slowly coming back to fitness, and I think you're gonna see him towards middle to late September. Cody Brown's injury is not serious. He should be back here soon. I don't think he'll miss the game against Illinois. So if that's the case, you might see him kind of feature as well. But Paris Jones is definitely one of those guys that you can look at him and say he's not just a practice player; he's also a gamer. So that was a that was good to see as well. So I think that's the biggest things that you can take away from the offense. So the key takeaways when you look at the offense, you see Brennan Armstrong, still the guy that we remembered. The O-line is a work in progress. Like I said, I give him a solid B in the performance. Brennan, I'll give kind of a B plus because of that third quarter. Wide receivers, I would probably say a B minus C just because of those drops that we've had. We had a lot of, I think Keaton Thompson, Lavelle, all of them, they averaged in the double digits of yards after catch, but the game would have been looked a lot different if a few wide receivers didn't drop balls. So I wasn't it wasn't a good day for them. That's something that their Coach Hagens is going to work them a lot this week. So I think overall the offense was B. I think it was a good first outing for this group because obviously they're adjusting to new scheme. They're working on timing. And it's honestly it's a little bit what I expected. I didn't expect to fire all cylinders when this is your first opportunity to go against a live opponent on the first day. I honestly think what we saw is what should expect from a first outing for this offense. I think there's a place for a lot of improvement, and they have the skilled players to be better. So we'll see how they handle Illinois next week. That's going to be a better test for this offense. And we're just going to cut to break real quick, and we're going to talk about the defensive side of the ball and then get my overall thoughts on what's next for Virginia as they prepare for Illinois. So we'll be right back. And welcome back to the Good Old Podcast. I'm Jacquie Franciulli for Wahoo's 24/7. And we talked a little bit about the offense. I gave them a solid B for that first outing of the season. Some things to work on, like I mentioned. And then moving on to the defense. I think when you look at the defenses, again, I think, yes, there's a lot of things that was said preseason, and I still believe a lot of those things. But again, like I said in the game preview, I expected them to come out slow. I didn't expect them to be world beaters or dominate Richmond defensively that quickly. Just because they needed to assimilate and also just needed to get into, I guess, game mindset. First time these guys were out trying to figure out the packages that Coach Rudd was working with. He's mentioned it in the fall that he kind of threw a lot of stuff at them, and then trying to see what worked best with them, and then kind of taking that playbook and cutting it and just giving him the plays that work best with his players currently. I also think a lot of these guys were coming back from bangs and um, some injuries. Like for example, Antonio Cleary didn't hit for the last 2-3 weeks. I think it was the last time he didn't hit in that first scrimmage, and then I think he had one practice where he allowed contact, and then he didn't hit again until the first game. So I think that was some of the issues that D line was having. Was there was a lot of guys were coming back and getting more game fitness, or I guess less more contact on that opening game. So that's why I was a little bit hesitant to say that they were going to come out swinging. I thought they were going to be better. I thought the secondary was going to be better, which they were. I thought the secondary was going to be better. And the D line, I think it's going to be ultimately going to be a strong unit because of their depth. I know they didn't get much of that push in the game, and I guess I'm just going to start breaking down the defense. I know the defensive line didn't get much push and didn't give that chaos. I felt like Chico Bennett and Camp Butler didn't pressure much, but then also Richmond was playing that up tempo offense, which is I guess a little hard to attack. That's what Nick Jackson was saying. It is a more of a challenge when they are playing that up tempo offense. I think that is something that Virginia has struggled in the past, and I think that's something that they're going to have to work on moving forward because you notice that they struggled a bit. But also, I think they didn't have the desired first lineup up there. You when you look at who started in the middle, especially, you didn't have Josh Ahern. And he's the guy, we talk about Paris Jones having the he's a gamer game against Richmond. Josh Ahern had essentially the same thing when he came in the second half. Remember, he didn't play in the first half because he had that targeting call against Virginia Tech last season. They didn't have a bowl, so he couldn't sit out that first half. So the ACC offices told Tony Elliott and his staff that Josh Ahern had to sit out the first half against Richmond. Ahern, when he came in, he made an instant impact. He is really good against the run. Now, pass protection, he still needs to improve a few things, but the good thing about how Coach Rudd schemes his defense is that there is an extra safety. So with that extra safety, Josh Ahern can focus more on the run. There's a little more help and coverage. So that means that defense highlights his strength, which is what we saw in the second half. Ahern was able to come on and made two of the biggest stops for the Virginia defense in 3rd and 4th and 1 inside Virginia territory. He met running back Aaron Dykes for the Richmond Spiders and tackled him twice to turn over the ball on downs. And he came on, he finished with 5 tackles, and he had his first career sack. And honestly, he should have had an interception too. And that other drive shouldn't have gone that far for Richmond because it should have been an interception. He was really good at keeping his eyes to the quarterback and snatching an interception. Actually, Tony Elliott said that he should have called a timeout before that play because he realized that there was a issue in the substitutions, and that's something that he's going to learn. And again, we'll talk about that at the end of the episode about overall thoughts of the game. But again, Josh Ahern is going to be a big playmaker, and him alongside Nick Jackson is going to be a good pairing. Look at the stats for the game. Nick Jackson led in tackles. Again, a very quiet 14 tackle game. Nick just does his job quietly. I think him and Josh Ahern are going to be an excellent partnership. They both complement each other and what their strengths are. And I think you're going to see that more and more when they play. James Jackson I think is not suitable for that will role. I think he's often, when we saw the pairings, it was often Nick Jackson and Josh Ahern and James Jackson and Hunter Stewart. with possibly us a few moments of Deshaun Perry for Hunter Stewart. So I think that was a situation there too. That's why you saw, now I want to say hesitancy, but you saw some learning curve on James Jackson's part in that first half. And if you look at Richmond's running numbers, you saw how Virginia's defense did adapt. That was something that you should credit with Coach Rudd and the defense. They did adjust pretty well in the game. In the first quarter, Richmond averaged 6 yards per carry after running the ball 11 times for 67 yards. Then that number went down to 4.7 yards per carry in the second quarter because UVA made adjustments. That number went down even more in the second half. They just averaged 4 yards per carry in the entire second half, 4.2 in the third quarter, and 3.3 in the fourth quarter. So with the addition of Josh Ahern and more adjustments in the second half, they were able to stop the run against Richmond. So there was good adjustments being made on the field. So when you look at the defense, yes, there's going to be need improvement. The defensive lines need to get off their blocks, and they also need to push a little bit more and cause a little more chaos, cause a little bit more havoc. Yes, that's something that they'll need to get some pass rush. But we also saw what one player can do in the linebacker unit and how Josh Ahern is going to be a critical part to that piece. And you also saw a secondary that did a pretty good job. I liked what I saw from Darius Bratton in his field safety role. The biggest issue is that run game because against Illinois next week, and we're going to dive into Illinois a little bit more closely as the week goes on. Like you saw last week, on Wednesday morning, we'll have a breakdown of Tony Elliott's press conference and the podcast episode on Wednesday. And then on Thursday, I'm actually going to have a guest from Jeremy Warner from our Illinois site. He's going to come on the pod and he's going to talk about Illinois. And obviously, he's going to bring up Chase Brown, who had 199 yards on 36 carries this past game. And he's the guy who had most of his yardage after his first hit. So that's going to be an interesting matchup for Virginia. So defensively, I think overall it was a BB minus. I think the first half, the running game, they needed to stop the run a little bit better. But again, they adjusted. So I think it was a decent performance in that regard where the team and the coaches adjusted. Again, there's a lot of communication with the substitution penalty and those sort of operational things that need to be changed as well. But that's something where Tony Elliott, as we mentioned, a lot of these coaches are coming in for the first time coaching together. And also this is the first time that, Tony Elliott was coaching as a head coach. He had a lot of decisions to make. So this is sort of thing that they're going to adapt moving forward. That's sort of the what you expect for a first-time head coach in the first game, which is why you want to start off with a Richmond and not with Clemson or a tougher opponent. So overall thoughts in the game. And I mentioned this in my 5 takeaways after the game. If you're not a Wahoo's 24 subscriber, as I post within an hour or two after the game, I usually do my 5 biggest takeaways of the game. And one of the things that I mentioned was this is going to be a process. Like I kind of harped on earlier, this is not going to be a magic wand situation where you go, defense is better than last year and the offense is clicking in a new scheme. You need time. It's a process. You're having players adjust to their new roles in a live situation. And I think this was a good first step in the process. So I'm not in this defense is like last year. This defense has no talent. I don't think that, because I do believe this defense has talent. I do think this defense has a higher ceiling. I think what we saw on the first game is just one step in this defense. The biggest development that you see on a college football team is between the first and second game, because this is the first time you have live tape. So you expect a bigger jump from the first to the second game because the coaches can evaluate what they saw on the field and they can adjust and adapt. I think that's where your first true test is can this coaching staff adapt after what they saw? Can they learn? And I think also you're also thinking that this coaching staff will also learn from their mistakes too. That's something that they're also going to see. Like Tony Elliott said, you should have called a timeout before that substitution because the guy wasn't off the field yet. And that was the play that Josh Ahern had that interception, which was called back. So he's learning. And he's maybe considering, maybe at the end of the first half, maybe he should have called a timeout so they can had a 2-minute drill and keep the offense a little bit more on there so they can develop that killer instinct he said they didn't have. So maybe that's something that where they can look at and say, maybe next time I'll be a little bit more aggressive in that. So maybe my aggressiveness can be mirrored by my players. And my final point is something where we talk about technique. We talk about fundamentals all the time with these players, but you also have to adjust their mentality. And mentality sometimes takes a little bit. What I saw a lot of fundamentals and technical things that were better. What you saw, and it's something that I think the staff is going to work on consistently, is you saw still the same problem that I saw last year with Bronco Mendenhall's staff, that this team couldn't play 4 quarters. They weren't consistent from the first whistle to the last. You saw that in the 3rd quarter. You saw them kind of have that little downturn on the offense as well. And that was a problem last year because if you look back, a lot of times when they weren't controlling in a game, the other team came back. We had the Louisville close call. We had the Miami close call. That's because they didn't play 4 consistent quarters. And then you had games where they didn't play early on, and then they had to dig themselves out of a hole. So those situations can cause problems when you're not facing a Richmond, especially toward the second half of the season. You can't afford those things. You need to play 4 quarters. And I think that is something where the staff is working on mentally. You need to have that killer instinct. You need to finish teams off. So that is something where I'm more curious to see how you grow from that because that takes time. That does. It's harder to change a team's mentality than it is to change their fundamentals and technicality. So that is something where it'll be something to watch moving forward. But just because that is something that I noticed from last year and I saw it again this season. That is probably one of my biggest concerns is can they keep that consistency going for 4 quarters? So I think overall, it wasn't a bad first game. They got the win. We saw some good things. We saw some good new names pop up. We saw that they have talent, and we also saw potential in what they can do with more game experience. That's the key. More game experience will be big. So it was a good game. We saw a lot of good things. And next is the first true test. It's a road game at Illinois. Last year, Virginia beat Illinois pretty easily at home, but this time they're heading on the road. And Illinois is a better team this year. Virginia has a lot of the same weapons on offense, but it looks like a new offense. On defense, it's going to be a true test for them against the rush. Can they stop Chase Brown? We're going to have those game previews coming up on Thursday morning. We'll have the in-depth game preview, and then we'll have full coverage from Tony Elliott. And starting from next week, we're also going to have a segment for our Wahoo's 24/7 VIP subscribers that we call Closer Look. It's where I rewatch the game with our message boards. We kind of look at those plays a little bit closer, film breakdowns. And that will be on Sunday nights at 9 p.m. live on our message boards. I might try to do one on YouTube as well. So if you're not a subscriber, head over to Wahoo's 24/7. We are running a 75% off sale right now. So that means you get monthly subscription for $2. So if you sign up for an annual, so it's a pretty good deal. So we'll have full coverage from the season, also recruiting. There was a couple of recruits visiting on grounds on Saturday as well. So a lot of stuff happening, and I hope you guys enjoy what new content we're bringing. We're actually adding some new writers as well to the site. So we're excited for the future of Wahoo's 24/7. So thanks everyone for listening. Thanks again for supporting this podcast. I really appreciate all of you that have followed on here and subscribed to our podcast. If you have yet to subscribe, please subscribe to us wherever you listen to our podcast. And please leave us a 5-star review on Apple and Spotify. So thank you, everyone. And we'll be back here on Wednesday. So until then, hope you guys have a good Monday and Tuesday.